India, page number Medieval India, page number 209, Foreign Trade and European Traders. We have already mentioned that there was a number of ports and towns from which brisk trade between India and outer world was carried on. India not only supplied foodstuffs such as sugar, rice, etc. to many countries of Southeast and West Asia, Indian textiles played a very important role in the trade of the region. As an English agent observed, from Aden to Achen, from head to foot, everyone was clothed in Indian textiles. This statement, even though a little exaggerated, for Egypt and Ottoman Turkey also produced cotton and exported textiles, was essentially true. It was this which made India the virtual manufacturer of Asian world, excluding China. The only articles which India needed to import were certain metals such as tin and copper, production of which was insufficient. Tin was used for making bronze, certain spices for food and medicinal purposes, war horses and luxury items such as ivory. The favorable balance of trade was met by import of gold and silver. As a result of the expansion of India's foreign trade, the import of silver and gold into India increased during the 17th century. So much so that Bernier says gold and silver, after circulating over every part of the world, is finally buried in India, which is the sink of gold and silver. This statement is also based on exaggeration, for in those days every country tried to hold on to gold and silver. However, only India and China were largely successful in doing so because of the scale of their economies and their being largely self-sufficient. We have already mentioned in the advent of the Portuguese into India towards the end of the 15th century. During the 17th century, many other European traders, especially the Dutch, the English, and the French, came to India for purposes of trade. The enterprise was a direct result of the growth of European economy consequent upon rapid expansion in the fields of agriculture and manufactures. The Portuguese power had begun to decline during the second half of the 16th century. Despite vehement Portuguese opposition, the Dutch established themselves at Masulipatam, obtaining a firman from the ruler of Golconda in 1606. They also established themselves in the Spice Islands, Java and Sumatra, so that by 1610 they predominated in the spice trade. The Dutch had originally come to the coast for the sake of the spice trade, but they quickly realized that spices could be obtained most easily against Indian textiles. The cloth produced on the Coromandel coast was most acceptable in Southeast Asia and also cheapest to carry. Hence, the Dutch spread south from Masulipatam to the Coromandel coast, obtaining pulicat from the local ruler and making it a base for their operations. Like the Dutch, the English also had come to east for the spice trade. But the hostility of the Dutch, who had more resources and had already established themselves in the Spice Islands, forced the English to concentrate on India. After defeating a Portuguese fleet outside Surat, they were able at last to set up a factory there in 1612. This was confirmed in 1618 by a firman from Jahangir, obtained with the help of Sir Thomas Roe. The Dutch followed and soon established a factory at Surat also. The English quickly realized the importance of Gujarat as a center for India's export trade in textiles. They tried to break into India's trade with the Red Sea and Persian Gulf ports. In 1622, with the help from the Persian forces, they captured Ormuz, the Portuguese base at the head of the Persian Gulf. Thus, by the first quarter of the 17th century, both the Dutch and the English were well set in Indian trade. The Portuguese monopoly was broken forever. The Portuguese remained at Goa and also at Daman and Diu, but their share in Indians' overseas trades declined continuously and was insignificant by the end of the century. Recent research has shown that despite their domination in the seas, the Europeans were never able to oust the Indian traders from Asian trade. In fact, the share of European trading companies from any part in India, Gujarat, Coromandel, or Bengal, remained a fraction of India's foreign trade. The reason why the Indian traders were able to maintain themselves were several. When it came to textile trade, the Indian traders knew both the domestic and foreign markets better. Also, the Indians were willing to work at a lower profit, 10 to 15% as against 40 to 50%, which was considered the minimum by the Dutch to meet their overhead costs, cost of factories, warships, etc. The English approach must have been similar. The Dutch and the English found that they could not trade in India or even feed the people in their factories without the cooperation of the Mughal government and Indian traders. For these reasons, and to reduce their cost of operations, they started freighting the goods of Indian merchants on their ships. The Indian traders had little objection to this, for it made their own operations safer. At the same time, Indian shipping grew so that from about 50 ships in the middle of the century at Surat, many of them well built, its numbers rose to at least 112 by the end of the century. This was another index of growth of India's foreign trade and domestic manufactures. Apart from sharing in the Asian trade, the English and the Dutch searched for articles which would be exported from India to Europe. At first, the prime trade was indigo, which was used to color the woolens. The indigo found most suitable was produced at Sarkhej in Gujarat and Bayana near Agra. Soon the English developed the export of Indian textiles called calicos to Europe. At first, the produce of Gujarat was sufficient for the purpose. As the demand grew, the English sought the cloth produced in Agra and its neighborhood. Even this was not enough. Hence, Coromandel was developed as an alternate source of supply. By 1640, export of cloth from Coromandel equaled that from Gujarat, and by 1660, it was three times that from Gujarat. Masulipatam and Fort St. George, which later developed into Madras, were the chief centers of this trade. Madras were the chief centers of this trade. The Dutch joined the English in their new venture, exporting both calico and indigo from Coromandel. The English also explored Lahari Bandar at the mouth of the river Indus, which could draw the produce of Multan and Lahore by transporting goods down the river Indus. But the trade there remained subsidiary to the Gujarat trade. More important were their efforts to develop the trade of Bengal and Odisha. The activities of the Portuguese and the Magh pirates in East Bengal made the development slow. However, by 1650, the English had set themselves up at Hooghly and Balasore in Odisha, exporting from there raw silk and sugar in addition to textiles. Another item which was developed was the export of saltpeter, which supplemented the European sources for gunpowder, which was also used as a ballast for ships going to Europe. The best quality saltpeter was found in Bihar. Exports from the eastern areas grew rapidly and were equal in value to the exports from the Coromandel by the end of the century. Thus, English and the Dutch companies opened up new markets and articles for export of India. Indian textiles became a rare rage in England by the last quarter of 17th century. As an English observer wrote, almost everything that used to be made of wool or silk, relating either to the dress of the women or the furniture of her houses, was supplied by Indian trade. As a result of Agitations in 1701. All calicos painted, dyed, printed, dyed, printed or stained from Persia, China or East Indies, that is India, were banned. But these and other laws imposing severe penalties had little effect. In place of printed cloth, the export of white Indian calicos, which had risen to 9.5 lakh pieces in 1701, jumped to 20 lakh in 1790. The growth of India's foreign trade, the influx of gold and silver into the country, and the linking of India more closely with the rapidly expanding European markets had a number of important consequences. While the Indian economy grew, the influx of silver and gold into the country was even faster. As a result, during the first half of the 17th century, prices almost doubled. The effect of the price rise on different sections of the society had yet to be worked out in detail. It probably weakened the old traditional ties in the village and made the nobility more money minded, greedy, and demanding. Secondly, the European nations searched for alternatives to export of gold and silver to India. One method was to enter the Asian trade network by trying to monopolize the spice trade and trying to capture the Indian trade in textiles. As we have seen, they had only limited success in those fields. Hence, they tried to acquire empires in India and its neighborhood so that they could pay from the revenues of these territories for the imports into Europe. The Dutch were able to conquer Java and Sumatra. But the key was India. Both the English and the French competed for the conquest of India, but they could not succeed as long as India remained strong and united. First under the Mughal rule and then under the able provincial governors. They could only succeed when internal and external factors weakened even these states. We shall study these developments in the subsequent volume. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. All the best for exams, and do share and subscribe to the channel to keep supporting us. Thank you, everyone.